Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have had a big update in the latest situation with the Tasmanian Stadium saga with the new proposed Macquarie Point Stadium in Hobart. The long-awaited Tasmanian Planning Commission report being handed down yesterday, and it was brutal in coming out and saying that the stadium is essentially too big for the site and too costly for the state of Tasmania to be able to afford. The report saying that the proposed Macquarie Point Stadium should not proceed, and the Tasmanian Planning Commission saying that the stadium would diminish the economic welfare of the state, and saying that the Liberal government's cost benefit analysis was significantly overestimated and that the stadium would have an irrevocable and unacceptable impact on the landscape of the city of Hobart if it was to be built. The report did estimate that the cost, again, unsurprisingly, would go up right around $1 billion in terms of the initial construction cost, and obviously with the interest, with it being debt funded, that would go up to around $1.8 billion over the next 10 years. They're saying that the taxes would need to be increased on the Tasmanian taxpayer for 30 years, and it would cost each household around $5,900 to fund the stadium. Obviously, we know the cost has sort of been going up since it was initially estimated at around $715 million. They're now saying around $1 to $1.1 billion. I have been saying all along that really the estimated cost of this thing has been way underestimated from day one. When you look at other stadiums built in Australia and around the world, really nothing significant getting built for less than $1 billion in the current economic climate, with inflation, with the cost of construction, cost of labour, etc. And even the Premier's come out and said, well, we estimate it is going to be $1.13 billion now. And obviously there will be interest accrued on that debt over the next few years. And the report also came out and said the cost-benefit ratio is less than 0.5, which means that for every $1 spent on the construction of the stadium, the state would receive less than 50 cents of benefit per $1 spent. They've also said that the size, location, and the geographical features of the site do not support the disproportionately large monolithic building proposed, and also that the construction would basically negatively impact Hobart's character and historic cultural heritage. And the report also saying that the project will, quote, diminish the economic welfare of Tasmanians as a whole. So this is the outcome of the 12-month-long project of state significance pathway that the government has gone down. Really negative outcome here for the Liberal government. Probably not unexpected though. This thing is highly controversial, as we all know, in Tasmania, but the report really coming out and blasting the stadium and recommending that it should not be built in any way, shape or form. Now, it is worth noting this isn't a binding report, it is just a recommendation. This thing will still go to a parliamentary vote, which will ultimately determine whether it gets built or whether it gets scrapped. And that sort of has been the understanding of the situation for a long time. No surprises there. It is due to go to a vote in Parliament towards the end of 2025. And the common consensus was that while it does have the support of both major parties, it is ultimately going to come down to the votes of a few independents. We did see the recent election lately in Tasmania, Liberals holding on to a minority government, really nothing changing in terms of the makeup of the Parliament, nothing significant anyway. Labor maintaining that they do support it through the election process. However, the new Labor leader Josh Willey telling the media yesterday when the report dropped that the party would take its time to consider the report, and he didn't categorically say that Labor supported the stadium. Now, obviously, that's not saying that they're not going to, and maybe you can say, well, it is just politics, they're going to take their time, they're going to draw it out, but they're saying they're going to sit down, read the 200-page report, and really come to a considered decision as to whether they still support the stadium or not. Obviously, the whole thing is reliant on at least Labor and the Liberals supporting it. If Labor did pull their support, this thing wouldn't even pass the lower house of Parliament, let alone the upper house, and it would really be dead on arrival when it came to that vote. Labor changed their tune earlier in the year where they said, well, we are going to support it based on the fact that it is going to create jobs, it is going to create economic benefit in terms of the construction, in terms of obviously wages to the workers, creating jobs for Tasmanians. But it does remain to be seen, are they going to continue to support this thing? A lot of the polls saying it doesn't really have a lot of support, certainly not majority support when it comes to the Tasmanian people. And you would think with this report, it isn't going to do any favours in terms of the popularity of the project. So really the question is, what does this mean for the stadium? What does it mean for the upcoming parliamentary vote? It needs to pass both houses of parliament, obviously with the lower house. If, as expected, all the Liberal and Labor members vote for it, it will pass that pretty easily. And then it really comes down to the upper house. In terms of the upper house, there's 15 members, Liberals and Labor both holding 3 seats. However, the president of the Legislative Council, which is the upper house, is held by Craig Farrell, who is a Labor member. And the convention in Tasmania is that if it comes to a deciding vote, that the president has to vote in the negative. So we can probably assume the 3 Liberal members and the 2 other Labor members will vote yes, meaning that they would need another 3 votes to get a majority of the 15. The rest of the upper house, you've got 1 Green and 8 independents. Obviously, the Greens have been very outspoken. They don't support this thing full stop. So really the government needing 3 votes of those independents to pass. And really, if you read the tea leaves of those independents in the upper house, there's about 4 that potentially could come out and support it. So really the job of the government, assuming Labor continues to support this, is really to woo those 4 independents who are potentially on the fence and maybe make some concessions in other areas, some policy decisions, some infrastructure-based decisions to get those votes over the line. So after this report, we really don't have any further clarity in terms of whether this thing is going to go ahead or not. We do know it is going to go to a parliamentary vote later this year, and it really just depends on whether the Liberal Premier Rockcliffe can keep Labor on board and get 3 of those independents across the line to get it through both houses of parliament. So if you look at the report, really you have to split it into 2 parts. Obviously there's a subjective and objective component of it. When you look at the aesthetics of it, you can argue, well, it doesn't really matter what the report says. It's a matter of opinion whether it benefits or harms Hobart's charm and the aesthetics of it. Obviously, if you are for the stadium, you're just going to come out and say, well, the current situation at Mack Point, it is just an industrial wasteland. You're really not doing anything negative. If anything, you're going to clean it up, put a nice new bit of infrastructure in there and really liven up that part of the city. But with the economic side, you can't really argue this is a massive amount of debt for a state like Tasmania, which already has its problems in terms of its debt situation. Can it afford to do this? The population only around 500,000 or just over across the entire state. So while you can see maybe a Western Australia or South Australia in the past has supported a major stadium project, the proportional sort of size of the debt is a lot higher for Tasmania than some of those other mainland states. And you've got to ask the question, if it doesn't pass Parliament, what does the AFL do? We've seen a lot of reports this week. Nathan Buckley missing out on the Melbourne job. Did he miss out or did he withdraw? He's come out and said, I would take the Tasmanian coaching job if it was offered to me. And the common consensus really is that Nathan Buckley will get that job. And you'd think the Devils would be pretty keen to announce that maybe as soon as the next couple of weeks. We've also seen the Devils getting approved to come into the VFL and VFLW next year in 2026. They have started advertising for tryouts for players. We know the board and the CEO roles have been filled. So this thing really moving. There is really the bones of a club getting set up now. So does the AFL stick to its guns? If the stadium doesn't get up, do they come out and say, no, sorry, it's all over. You're not getting a team. It would be a massive call for Andrew Dillon and the AFL to make. But at this stage, they are sticking to their guns and saying no stadium, no team. Obviously, the AFL wanting this to happen. And even if they come out and say, well, you can have the team and play in the existing stadiums, it would be a massive blow to the team and its finances in terms of those corporate seats, the bigger stadium, the ability to attract fans from the mainland and around the state to come and see the new stadium inject tourism dollars into the state and the city of Hobart. So the business case for the team probably significantly less if this doesn't go ahead. But you just feel the AFL can't say no at this point. This thing's too far gone in terms of setting up the team, talking about coaches, talking about VFL players, etc. It would be maybe the biggest call ever made in AFL history if they killed it now. I really don't expect to see anything out of the AFL one way or the other until this vote either passes or doesn't pass Parliament. Clearly, if it passes Parliament, would expect to see the full licence granted at the end of the year, rather than the provisional licence that they have now. But if it doesn't pass through Parliament, then the call will have to be made. And really, if Dillon comes out and squashes it, that's his legacy, the man that killed the Tassie AFL team. So it really is high stakes stuff, both in the AFL and the Tasmanian Parliament in the back end of this year. We're really no closer to knowing what is the go with this thing. Is there another couple of twists in the tail? And at the very least, obviously, the Premier, Jeremy Rockliff, has got a massive job ahead of him to whip up those votes and make various commitments to those crossbenchers, independents, and obviously Labor throughout the process. That is going to be all we're going to have time for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.